Welcome to Building the Basics, where we go over topics and questions new and prospective gun owners have to help take the anxiety out of your first purchase. Think of us as that relative going with you to buy your first car. Jim, what are we talking about today?
So today we're going to have a conversation on considerations as it pertains to home security as a whole, and then you'll hear a little bit of differences of some approaches regardless of whether or not you have a firearm, and then we'll talk specifically of what kind of firearm is the best tool for your personal situation.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Jim. So let's start off with a few statistics from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, so the BJS. So according to the BJS, a burglary occurs in the U.S. every 30 seconds. Rural and suburban areas are significantly more likely to experience home burglaries than urban areas. 81% of home invasions occur through the first floor doors or windows. 61% of offenders were unarmed when they entered a home. 12% of those who were armed possessed a firearm. Victims of burglaries lost an estimated $3 billion in property losses in 2019. And home invasions are more common in warmer months, the highest in March, April, and June. So anything there stick out to you, Jim?
Well, there's a couple things, actually. So admittedly, I was a little surprised that rural and suburban areas are more likely to experience home burglaries than urban areas. But I guess if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. It's kind of like counterintuitive because, urban areas, you have more people, it's more condensed. So one might think, oh, well, there's more crime, or there might be more possibility for home invasions or something to that effect because there are more people. But if you think about it, there's a greater opportunity for a home burglary or home invasion in rural and suburban because you don't have as many people witnessing something that could possibly happen. So it's a very interesting, kind of paradox, I guess, in that situation.
Yeah, I think for me, it harks to nickname of New York City, right? The city that never sleeps. So there's always somebody awake, somebody who's walking around all the time. Whereas living in suburbia, the streets are pretty much empty as soon as it gets dark. You might get one or two people who are still out running or whatever the case is, but it's usually pretty far and few between. The thing that popped out to me with those statistics were the offenders who were unarmed. So it states that 61% of offenders were unarmed when they entered a home. And that kind of stuck to me where they said they were unarmed when they entered a home, meaning they could be arming themselves with something in your home.
That's a good point. Yeah, like if you go through, the kitchen or something like that, or if you, break into the window, break through a window on the first floor, kind of like what it said, you could get a butcher knife, you could get, just a steak knife. It's like that doesn't... Just because they don't have something when they come into your home doesn't mean that they won't have something. Yeah, it's a great point.
When I was thinking back to when I was younger and played sports, playing baseball, right? I knew a lot of guys who were playing lacrosse and they just dropped their stuff. I'd drop my stuff off in the, in the first floor laundry room where we went in through the garage, or, you're dropping it off in the kitchen or whatever the case is. And so, but at the same time, I also don't want to be alarmist. I don't want people to think, oh, well, the offenders breaking into your house or somebody breaking into your house means that your life is going to absolutely be in danger. A lot of them are also just looking for something quick to take, right? They noticed, hey, this guy's got a nice TV or has a PlayStation 5 or a sweet mountain bike or something like that, right? So they're breaking in and just looking for something of opportunity to grab and sell or whatever the case might be. I think the other piece of it was that 12% of those who were armed possessed a firearm, meaning out of the 39%, 12% of those folks had a firearm, which it really kind of sucks to be that person. One of the other statistics that I didn't call out here was that there are about 250,000 home invasions a year.
Oh, real quick. So it's actually 1.2 million home invasions per year. So I know where you're going with this, though. So we have the 1.2 million home invasions per year. You have the 61% of those home invaders that are unarmed, which means that you have 39% of home invaders who are armed. So you take the 39% of the 1.2 million, that means that you have about 468,000 that are armed with some weapon. And then of those 468,000, you have about 56,000, just over 56,000 that are armed with a firearm of some sort. So, yeah, I mean, you look at these numbers and you try to extrapolate that against, what's our total population of the country. So we have between 340 million, 350 million or so that live in the United States. So, I mean, 56,000 home invaders that are armed with a gun, 468,000 that are armed with some weapon in general. Yeah, it's a smaller statistic, but the problem is it's, when you are that victim, when you're the victim of a home invasion, of a burglary, something like that, it hurts, right? You don't want it. We don't want you to be that victim of a home invasion. We don't want you to be the victim where you have to, deal with, not only, physical loss, but you have that emotional toll that, you now have to deal with. So this is where we're trying to go with this episode is, we want to make sure that you have that strategy to, just not become one of these statistics.
Yeah, I think helping folks not become a statistic, but, I think some of the things that we're going to be talking about also will help folks, even if they decide not to purchase a firearm, would help lower the odds of them being a statistic through home invasion, regardless, right?
Mm-hmm. So for sure,
I guess you wanna kick off some of this. I think a good way of looking at this would be going from outside in, right? Outside from the furthest from your house, and then moving in, considerations and home security, and what things that people should be aware of or consider.
Yeah. So there's a lot actually that as you're kind of evaluating your house or evaluating your street, like where you live on, you'll probably start to look at things a little bit differently of how your street's set up, or how your house is facing, or how your house is set up. And definitely want to encourage our listeners to kind of take a little bit of an inventory. What's the situation of street lighting on your street? Do you have any street lamps that may go on or off with the sun or at dusk or something like that? I know that there's kind of some automation that some towns or cities will put in. So you got street lamps, and then those street lamps will go on usually around sunset or dusk or something like that. But if you're more in a suburban or rural setting, that may not be happening. So just kind of take a survey of that. But then at the same time, do you have already existing exterior house lights that are kind of pointing out to your lawn or out to the street, like outwards from your house? Then with that, are there motion sensors? So as you get closer to your house, do you have a motion sensor light that as you approach the driveway, or as you approach the front door or the garage door or something like that? Are you seeing that there's motion sensor lights that may light up that dead space that you might see that is not covered by some floodlights or anything like that? So kind of what I'm trying to say is, light is your friend, especially in the dark, right? So we'll touch on as, in a nighttime scenario later on when we're getting into the interior, but especially the exterior, when you have that kind of alarming bright light that gets shown, in the dead of the night, you have somebody that could be approaching that is looking to, either break in or cause harm or something like that. And they kind of get shocked. They'll say, "Oh, well, somebody's up. There's a light that just went on. I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'm out of here." Right?
Absolutely. And I'm gonna connect this back to my personal experience. And so one of the things, so I used to live in a it's a suburban area, but it was kind of rural in the Northeast, in New England area. And we had 2 acres, and there were no street lights, and so all the lights were from my house. So I had a couple of things. I had lighting for my landscaping, which was really nice and bright. Did a great job of highlighting the landscaping, looked really nice. But in addition to that, I did have a motion sensor floodlight in front of the garage at really pretty high up on the peak of that building, so that it could really catch somebody approaching, and that motion detector would go off. I also had motion detector lights on the sides of the house, because those were areas that were not being covered by the floodlights on the garage or the lights on my back deck. And so wanted to make sure that those spaces were covered. Again, if you are somebody who is sneaking around, there was a good amount of space between my house and my neighbor's house. And so if you wanted to avoid the motion detector on my garage, you could just walk into my neighbor's yard and then cross over from there and make it to the side of my house, and avoid the front flood. But thankfully I also had side floodlights that were motion detectors. And so you kind of, however you tried to approach my house, you'd kind of get caught with light. So that was living in a suburban rural area. I've also lived in a townhouse in the more densely populated suburban area in Pennsylvania, New Jersey area, and they had streetlights. And so one of the great things was that I lived on the end of a townhome, and so we were closest to the streetlight. So the streetlight, while I guess it can be annoying if you're trying to sleep, if you don't have any blinds or curtains on your windows, it basically just made sure that my front door was always lit by the street lamp. Mm-hmm. And so that could be a consideration for a lot of people. But going from there, I think talking about the position of your house and being aware of it, living in a where your house is on the inside of a cul-de-sac, is your house on a main road, is your house on a blind corner, whatever the case is. If somebody can park their vehicle and get away from your house quickly, or if somebody can block you in, or if somebody can park their vehicle and approach your house without, say your house is at the top of a hill, can they park their vehicle at the bottom of the hill and walk up from there? So I think knowing the position of your house and potential points where somebody could be trying to surreptitiously get into your home, I think is something that you would want to consider. And I think that would also play into what kind of lights you have, motion detectors, how you position those lights, parts of your yard where you might want lights. Again, like I said, I had landscape lighting all over that yard, so my front yard was very well lit up, throughout the night, and I just left those lights on. I had a timer where come on at dusk and go off at dawn.
Yeah, and kind of going along with the lighting aspect, it's always a good consideration to think of what's your camera situation, especially nowadays. There's so many options. When it comes to having cameras, you have, like, for example, the Ring doorbell, or Simply Safe doorbell. I mean, there's so many different companies out there that have some sort of exterior camera, and then you can mount exterior cameras as well, not just for your doorbell or your front door. You can have things mounted in each corner if you wanted to, or I've even seen people put a camera in a tree at the end of their property so that they can have a little bit more warning and a little bit more time to prepare if somebody was coming up their driveway, intending to cause harm or intending to, enter their home unwelcome.
And talking about trees and shrubs, Jim, I think that's an interesting one because I recently moved out of a rental, short-term rental, where there were a lot of trees and shrubs that were obscuring the front door, and so it looked really great. The landscaping was gorgeous, but what I realized was if you were somebody looking to make entry into that house, it'd be very difficult for anybody driving by or walking by to see you doing something at my front door. The pros of that was if I had an Amazon package or whatever the case, porch pirates probably wouldn't see them. But the cons of that would be that if you can't see the package, you probably can't see a guy trying to jimmy the lock on my front door.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned about like Amazon packages and such. One thing is to consider so yeah, you might not be home right away to get an Amazon package on your doorstep. It happens to everybody every day. But when you are home, and if you're, whether it's yourself, whether you're married, whether or not you got kids, it's extremely important to make sure that there's nothing that's in your yard or in your lawn or in your driveway that may be valuable. So it's kind of just somebody is going by and could see what's in your yard or your driveway. Make sure you just pick up your stuff, because who knows who's scoping out your place. You never know what's happening. You never know what who could be visiting your neighbors and such like that. So again, it's not just like I'll just leave my stuff out for a little bit. It's I would think, if something has value, you would want to make sure it's kind of locked away in the place that it should be, whether it's a shed or your garage. And if you do have a garage, make sure your garage is closed. You don't want to have, unwanted access to, your garage space. And then usually a garage will have a garage door into the home if you have a attached garage, right? So, that garage allows for access to your home too. So a couple things there.
Well, I think that's an interesting point you make about the garage, because for garages, right, a lot of folks are like, and I had this thought previously as well, is, hey, I'm in a really safe neighborhood. Who cares if I close my garage or not? It really kind of doesn't matter. But when you're thinking about it, most people aren't going to be robbing their neighbors, right? Mm-hmm. It's probably going to be somebody who's visiting somebody or somebody driving by. Mm-hmm. It kind of depends on where it is. If you live in the deep center of a ginormous suburban, subdivision, okay, maybe not, right? But if you're living on a main street in suburbia, and they're just people driving by all the time, and they don't necessarily have to live in that neighborhood to drive through, or it's a pass through to another part of town, or whatever the case might be, then a garage really gives somebody a lot of insight into your life, right? If you have a bunch of expensive bikes, or if you've got an ATV in there, or if you've got an expensive lawnmower, or whatever the case is, a toy car, right? A 1973 Corvette or whatever the case is, right? Even somebody might be like, hey.
Even something like, snowboard, skis, right? Like literally anything.
Yep.
Like canoes, kayaks. Like there's so much that, people, you might take for granted. It's like, oh, I'll just put that on the rack, put it up on a shelf or something like that. And then you just don't think of, people could be walking by or driving by and seeing my possessions and thinking, oh, interesting. I'll make note of that. You know what I mean? So it's things that we have that we just, we have purchased it, or we have acquired it or bought it from somebody, it doesn't matter where you got it from. You have it now. It's your possession. Just make sure that you're mindful of things that you may not have considered before.
Well, and And a garage door is one entrance to your home. I think the one that we haven't talked about much yet is the main entrance to your house, right? Where is that located? Is it open and visible? Is it obscured by high trees and shrubs like we were talking about before? If you're living in an urban area, is it by a narrow alley? Is it, I've seen a lot of homes where the front door is through an alley, and that's the entrance, and that's also where you park your car, or whatever the case is, or that's where your garage entrance might also be. Mm-hmm. And so consideration would be, hey, where's the entrance, the primary entrance to my home located? And that would also be something to consider when you're talking about the next section where we want to talk about securing of entrances, right? So if it's something that is obscured or something that is hard for other people to see when somebody's doing something in front of your front door, trying to get into your front door, then you might want to consider the types of locks that you have. As Jim had talked about before, Ring doorbell or doorbell with a camera on it. Do you have a porch light or a door light by your front door? Is it illuminating that? Would it be odd if that light was out? Things like that for your front door. So I guess going into front doors, what kind of locks do you have? Do you have a deadbolt? Do you have a deadbolt with a locking cylinder underneath that deadbolt? A lot of times when you're going to suburban homes, it's just a deadbolt. There is no locking cylinder below that deadbolt. And so that's significantly less safe, but it isn't as pretty as a lot of suburban homes have those nice door handles that, you just depress that button, and there's no locking mechanism to it. The other thing would be the type of screws you have in your strike plates. The easiest thing that you can do to secure your front door, aside from the type of lock that you have, would be having extra long screws going through your strike plates into the door frame. Do you have something that's easily kicked in by somebody who's looking to get inside of your home?
And I remember the first time I saw one of those videos with just showing the difference between like the short screw and the long screw and how much different it makes, in that application. And it doesn't, like, a screw, a lot of people think, oh, a screw's a screw, it doesn't matter, it's whatever. But I was actually really surprised when I first saw that. It was years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but I remember seeing that and I thought, holy cow, that's something, so it's sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. Yeah. It's a huge difference. One thing, and I remember, kind of when we were, preparing for this episode and just going through ideas and such, when you were talking about like a door barricade system, the flip lock, and I don't think I've actually ever seen, what the flip lock is. Can you explain it a little bit?
Yeah. So, a flip lock is basically, it's not a lock in the traditional sense. So it basically is something that you install into your door jamb. It comes with extra long screws, so it actually goes all the way through the door frame, and then all it does is when you want to use it, you flip it over, and it basically just braces against your door. And for me, it serves two purposes. I have a toddler who knows how to operate all of the locks in my house now. And so that is the one way that I can keep her from opening my front door and going into the street, because it's probably 1.5 feet, 2 feet above where the deadbolt is. The other thing is, in addition to the strength of your deadbolt, especially if you have long screws through your strike plates, the flip lock is that extra level of security. So even if you didn't have that deadbolt engaged, that flip lock would basically prevent somebody from opening that door. And again, if you're using those extra long screws, it would prevent somebody from being able to kick that in easily. The other thing about the flip lock is, in my opinion, is that it is something that's very difficult for somebody to overcome. So you can pick locks, right? And if you have a lot of houses have decorative glass around the door or have glass in the door itself, and a lot of times where you're going to place that flip lock isn't immediately noticeable by anybody who would be willing to break that glass. So if I break the glass that's on your door, I break the glass that's around your door in the door frame, I still probably don't realize that there's a flip lock there. And so I'm reaching my arm in and I'm undoing the deadbolt, or I'm unlocking, the cylinder below the deadbolt. I still wouldn't be able to get in. I would probably, as if I was somebody who was ignorant of that system, I would probably be like, why is this door not opening? What's stuck, right? What's preventing me from opening this door? And so I also like the flip lock for that as well. So I was talking about the glass in the main entryway door. Just a quick side note: if you can put some sort of curtain or blind and draw those so that somebody can't see into your house when you don't want them to.
Yeah, when you get springtime, summertime, fall time, people want to open their windows and let the sun in and all that. It's it's great to do that. Of course, when you're home and all that. But if you're going away, if you're going out to the store, you're going, especially on vacation. But that's a separate topic that we'll get into. But yeah, just in general, if you're going to the store, close your blinds. People, especially if you live alone or if you're going out with your family or something, make sure that you're not making your house house, apartment, whatever, an easy target, so that somebody sees that you're leaving. They know what your familial situation is, and they might take notice. So it's it's just, curtains are not expensive. You get some curtains at the store and put them up, and you'll be good to go.
Yeah, and same goes for sliding glass doors, right? And you're talking about first floor windows and making sure that they're covered up. That statistic said that 81% of home invasions occur through the first floor door or window. And so making sure that your sliding glass door and first floor windows have a curtain or some sort of shade that prevents people from seeing in. I know that as long as I've been living on my own or outside of my parents' home, I've always had some sort of dowel or 2x4 or something to slip into the track between the sliding glass door and the wall, so that somebody, if I forget to lock it, then somebody just can't slide that thing open. Those locks aren't they're not a sophisticated lock. So if we're talking about something that somebody can defeat easily, sliding glass door lock is not super difficult to defeat. And then obviously the first floor windows, making sure that those guys are locked. In addition, there's also privacy film. People don't realize there are some privacy films out there that also keep the glass together. So if somebody's trying to smash in your window or break your glass, there is 3M privacy film or 3M heat heat retardant film that you can put on your window to keep your home cool. A lot of those also have an added benefit of holding your glass together when somebody's trying to break in, and so it makes it a bit more difficult for them to get in that way. One other thing that I wanted to touch on real quick, and I don't know if you do this, Jim, but parking your car outside of the garage in the evenings. Do you generally park your car outside of your garage, or you park it inside?
I park it inside, but I like to take care of my car. So especially if it's rain and snow and anything like that, I don't like having my car exposed to the elements. So I keep it in the garage.
Well, in addition to keeping your car nice, I mean there are other considerations too, right? I mean you keep a garage door opener in your car, right?
Absolutely, yeah, yep.
And I think most people do that as well. And you might even keep a spare key in your car, in case you need a spare key to get into your house or something. And so one of the considerations would be if you park your car outside of your garage, what is the potential for somebody to get into your car, which is a lot easier than getting into a house, depending on the car, and having access to a garage door opener and maybe a key to get into the house, even if you've locked your garage door entry. So I think that is another consideration I think a lot of people aren't maybe thinking about.
Well, the other interesting piece is you don't even need a separate garage door opener. So a lot of cars nowadays, you might have those buttons that are kind of in the visor or
Yep.
at in the top center. It's kind of related to your, it just sends a signal to your garage door. So you don't even need a separate garage door opener because it's already in your vehicle. So again, just something else to consider. But as it goes with garage door openers, though, I just thought of this is that a lot of the newer garage door opener systems out there, you have the ability to use an app on your phone, and some people don't even have programmed buttons in their car specifically for that reason, because they will just use that app on their phone to open up their garage door. So I can't imagine anybody in the year 2024 leaving their phone in their car overnight. So, they usually have it with them, in the house. So if you, don't have a separate garage door opener clicker, I'll call it, or if you don't have those buttons programmed, then if you're using that app in order to open up your garage door, then you probably, saved yourself a level of, I'll say, protection, and if you do have to leave your car out in the garage, outside of the garage, say you don't have a garage, or B, you're in a 2-car family and you have a 1-car garage, somebody's going to be outside. So that's just something to consider as well.
Yeah, I think those are definitely considerations, especially in 2024. I also wanted to touch on spare keys again, not inside of your car, but I know a lot of folks want to leave a spare key outside, right? Leave them under the doormat, as the stereotype is, or you have a fake rock, or you tape it to the inside of your mailbox or something. And I think that is something, again, who knows? I always say I think I would make a pretty good bad guy, right? Because I would want to observe somebody, get the routine, but also more important, I'd be looking for these types of things. Is the homeowner trying to go for convenience? Are they, trying to are they forgetful? And if they're forgetful and they leave things inside the house, they have to go back and forth, and they probably have a spare key out there. Or do they have somebody come and watch their house? Or do they have a neighbor come over quite often, right, and leave a spare key for them outside of the home? So looking for those types of things could definitely be something that a savvy bad guy would be doing. So, I think a good way of getting around that might be a smart lock. If you have a smart lock, I think there's one out there right now. I can't remember the brand name, but I've been seeing the ads for it. It looks like a regular lock. It looks like a regular deadbolt, and the smart features are built into it, and so you can use your phone to unlock it with the near field capabilities of your phone, or you can also have an RFID tag that's on your keychain or something like that, and it would unlock that door. But I think as more options are coming out and more things are available to to the consumer, I think it's definitely something that people should consider when hey, how do I get into my house, or how do I let somebody else into my house on a limited basis? Because a lot of the smart locks also allow you to have temporary passcodes typed into them, or you can give them a temporary RFID tag or something like that to get into your house, and just really eliminate some of the risk, especially since those things are tagged to people's emails or tagged to a specific person that you're designating.
And that's a perfect transition to talking about the different types of home security systems that are out there. So you have wired systems, you have wireless systems, you have all sorts of features that can come with those. One of the features that I really like, though, is the ability to assign a PIN number to each person that has access to your home. So when you have 4 people that are in your family, or 5 people in your family, or 6 people in your family, you have the ability to have 4 or 5 or 6 PIN numbers, which each are able to completely disarm that system. So to me, the idea of having that traceability to see who disarmed the system when can just be a really good help for if there's anything that ever happens, kind of can trace that back to say, okay, what happened in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these systems are pretty sophisticated these days, so they have a lot of capability in terms of helping you piece together exactly what happened, either between cameras, between PIN numbers, between what sensors were armed and disarmed at whatever time. So and so I think that's a good place to start talking about DIY versus professional systems. So most people know about like ADT as a professionally installed and monitored system. And, a very popular one right now is SimpliSafe as a DIY. And, the considerations are a little bit different between the two. One would be cost, right? SimpliSafe is, I think it's around $400 or $500 for the hardware, and there's no installation cost, and you're looking at somewhere between $15 and $20 a month for monitoring with no contract. With a company like ADT, you're looking, if you want all the smart features that SimpliSafe has, you're looking at probably $800 to $900 plus somewhere between $150 to $200 in installation, and somewhere between $20 and $35 a month for monitoring. And so I think those are considerations. One of the other things that I had noted, so I've had different security systems from different companies locally, ADT, Brinks. In my past is the how the system connects to the internet and gets an alert out. So for a lot of companies like ADT or Brinks, they have some sort of cellular backup. So there's a battery, there's a cellular backup. So even if power's out and something happens, that signal still gets passed on to the monitoring, part of the service, and they'll call you. They'll say, hey, power went out, or, we noticed this thing happened. Is everything okay? Whereas a lot of the DIY systems, they're basically just plugged in to your wall outlet and connect to your router. And so if power goes out, your router goes down, your power goes out at your house, then that DIY system is no longer active. It's no longer working for you. So just a couple of things to consider, not saying that a professionally monitored system is superior. I think everybody needs to look at their own situation and say, hey, how much money do I have to spend on this? Is this something that I'm going to utilize? But I think security systems are something that is a really, really good, second, third line of defense against home invasions. The first being securing your entrances and making sure that the exterior of your house is not something that is attractive to bad people. I think a security system, whether it is DIY or professional, either would be good at a minimum. But also realizing that not everybody can afford to spend $400 on or $900 on an installed system, and in addition, somewhere between $15 and $35 a month for monitoring. That could be a steep price for a lot of folks out there, especially in today's economy.
Yeah, then the nice thing is with a lot of these systems is that you can do a bit of like piecemealing and kind of plug and play together of different sensors. So for example, you got like door entry sensors or glass break sensors, or they have water sensors, freeze sensors, for not that wouldn't be for like home invasion protection, but that would be for, if your pipes freeze, if you live in the cold, or, stuff like that. Right. So there is the ability to have that kind of pick and choose of what you want, what you feel that your situation requires. I mean, the nice thing is also that I haven't seen one system that does not come with a massive alarm decibel. So I think when we have looked at this in the past, it was like 105 decibel for Simply Safe, and I think a lot of the other ones out there are just as loud, if not louder. So I don't know if people can appreciate how loud 105 decibels is, but it's really loud. So if you live in a populated area, people will understand that something is happening at your house if your alarm system gets triggered. So that's a nice thing about having just a very, very loud, obnoxious noise going off. You know what I mean?
I think that's part of it is like we were saying, light is a deterrent. Sound is also a good deterrent. Mm-hmm. Even if you're not paying for the monitoring and you just have a self-monitored system. I think a lot of the DIY systems out there have some sort of self-monitoring. So, even if it's not monitored by somebody who can call the police on your behalf, the alarm going off and blaring, alerting your neighbors to something going on at your house, I think is definitely better than having nothing. So with that, I think the next thing I'd like to touch on would be a family communication plan and what to do if the worst does happen and you are subject to a home invasion while you're home or your family is home with you. What are some of the things, Jim, that you see out there that mistakes that people are making with their communication and what they're doing to keep themselves safe?
Honestly, the biggest one is, social media can be enjoyable. Social media can be great to keep in touch with people, see, your favorite influencers out there and such. But man, I see all the time, people posting about, oh, I'm going on this vacation. I'm so excited for the next 2 weeks in whatever place. It's just, that you're making yourself, you're making your family, you're making your house a target. It sounds kind of rough to say, but it's true. You just don't want to post that I'm going on vacation and here are the dates that I'm going on vacation and here's where we're going, so that that we're not going to be at our domicile. Like, come on, just use a little bit of more common sense in that,
Or even posting while you're on vacation, because most of the
that
stuff
too,
automatically gets geotagged.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
So
exactly.
somebody's like, hey, yeah. I know that Jim lives in this town in this state, and I see that he just made a new social media post, drinking a martini somewhere, and it's geotagged, and I know that geotag is 5 hours away, right? 10 hours away. Mm-hmm. Well, I know Jim's not getting back anytime soon.
Right.
So yeah, that's one of the things that I like to do is, I like to post pictures of vacation, or my wife certainly does. And I think one of the things is we just wait until we get home.
Well, that's the thing.
We
Like
post the
you can
pictures.
take all the pictures you want. Say, enjoy the time. Have that album ready to post for when you get back. But just don't leave yourself. Don't leave your family. Don't leave your house to be a target. So that when you get back from a 2-week long vacation and it was so much fun, it was enjoyable. All of a sudden, your wife, your kids, you come back and your windows are broken. Your house is ransacked because eventually you find out that it was because you or somebody in your family posted pictures while you were on vacation, or that you posted that you were going away in advance. It's just, I just wish that people didn't do that. It's a hard thing to, not share exciting times, but that's just one thing you just should not do. How about you? What do you think?
Agree.
What's besides that, of course, what's something that you've noticed?
Using timers. I think my parents, when I was growing up, they used timers for lights in the house so that it, coming on, at regular times, but in the evening, just makes it look like somebody's at home, right? So when it starts to get dark and you're on vacation and it's like 6:30 at night, and all of a sudden your lights come on, and they stay on until say 10:30 or whatever time you normally stay awake until, and your timer shuts them off, right? Shuts your lights off at like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and then it starts up again. So if somebody who's looking at breaking into your house sees that and they know your routine, hey, they usually go to bed at 10:30, so they must be home. Seeing the lights come on and off certainly makes it a lot easier with things like Lutron or Casa or any of those other systems where your lights can be controlled from your phone, and you can really kind of designate different times. You can set a different schedule for every single day. If you're gone for an extended period of time, setting a different time for weekdays versus weeknights, or weeknights versus weekend nights. Just giving the impression that somebody is at home, and not making your home an easy target for somebody to break into. And I think that's one of the things, is having this this impression that family members are home, but also when you are home, knowing where all of your family members are, right? Are they sleeping in their room? Are they sleeping in a different room? Are they going to be awake in the basement? Do you have a kid who's a night owl? Do you have an uncle who's staying with you who, goes to bed early, but he sleeps, in the den or something like that? I think those are also important when we're talking about the family communication plan and planning for, a situation where your home might be invaded. So especially for people who have kids, right? Where's your kid's bedroom in relation to yours? Is your spouse staying up late and watching TV? I know my wife likes the K dramas and the C dramas and all of those other, the soaps basically on Netflix. And so, where's she going to be, or where's he going to be in the evenings? And, if something does happen, do you know how to get to them? Do you know where they're going to be? Or is it something that's going to be a surprise to you? You certainly don't want to be in a situation where your home is being invaded. Somebody's an intruder's in there, and you don't know whether it's an intruder or whether it's your family member. That's a pretty terrifying situation in my mind. So, having that awareness, and more important to that is, what is a safe central location inside of your home? Whether it is while people are awake, or whether it is while people are sleeping and they're woken up, or you have to go wake them up because you heard a bump in the night. Where's a safe location that you can kind of send everybody, and make sure that you have accountability for everyone, especially if you have young children. Do I have all of my kids with me? Is it a place where they can be barricaded in? Is it the primary bedroom? Is it the primary bedroom bathroom? Is it the primary bedroom closet? Is it a guest bedroom? Or do you have a safe room? Not everybody has the luxury of a safe room, and it doesn't necessarily have to be what you're seeing in the movies or whatever the case is. But if you want to set up a safe room, it could just be something that is a sturdy door. Replace your balsa wood door that's hollow in the middle that most houses are built with, right? And make sure that it's an interior door, no windows, no glass. Make sure you have a first aid kit in there. Put some water in there. Have a sturdy lock that locks from the inside, and has good reception for a cell phone, and maybe even a defensive weapon in there. And that can be your safe room. We're not saying that it has to be something that is completely impregnable by, an army of bad guys who are, Jason Bourne or something. It just has to be something that's tough enough for your average bad guy to get into. And again, it's all about deterrence, right? Hey, he's banging on the door. He's like, I'm going to kick it in, right? Long screws in the strike plates, and say, hey, I'm calling the police, right? He can't get in. They can't get in, right? And so, yeah, that could be a consideration is a safe room. And again, it doesn't have to be expensive, right? Just replacing one of the interior doors on a bedroom, on a closet, whatever the case is, and having that ability to kind of secure your family and loved ones behind that.
So, real quick, wanted to jump in here because this is I really like what you were saying, and I think one piece that people will miss is that it's important to practice. And as weird as that sounds, especially like if you have young kids or, kids that might understand kind of what's happening, like if they're, between, I don't know, like 5 and 10 years old, they start to understand, what might happen in a bad situation. It's really important for you or your spouse or whoever is, kind of that primary, that primary person to kind of lead through a situation like this. It's really important for you and that person, or you and your secondary, to figure out how does this happen in a real, a real life situation. So how do you do that? You do that by practicing. So if it's just you, okay, kind of run through your head, go through the motions of, okay, how do I get to where I need to get to? If it's you and a boyfriend or girlfriend, a spouse, anything like that, okay, well, let's figure out how do we get to that safe room together. And then when you have a spouse and kids, okay, how do we figure out how do we get to this place? What if we have a baby? What if we have young kids? What if we have older kids? Another thing that would be extremely helpful is if you have a safe word. So if you're able to say, okay, whatever word you want to come up with for your family to recognize that this is a bad situation, get to the safe room. Okay, then you whisper that word, you get that word somehow out to your family, and they get to where they need to get to. So it's extremely important to practice so that when the real thing happens, it goes as smoothly as it can go. Because once you're in that situation, adrenaline flows, and you start to not think and all this and that and the other thing. So practice doesn't always make perfect, but the more you practice, the better you can deal with that situation in real life.
Absolutely. And I think the other piece of it is we practice fire drills, right? We do fire drills at work. We do fire drills at school. This is no different. You should be doing fire drills with your family at home.
Exactly.
You should be making sure that all of these things are instilled in your family. Hey, what do you do if there's a fire? What do you do when there's an intruder, right? It's something that people overlook a lot of times because hey, it's probably not going to happen, right? And I think the big thing is what are you going to do when fear is there? And it makes a lot of sense to just be prepared for it, have your family be prepared for it, have a plan for what's going to happen. Whether it's getting to a safe room, whether it's escaping and evading, right? Having second floor ladders because of fire safety, right? If you have a fire in your home and you have a second floor ladder, that is accessibility to the exterior of your home. So if there is a concern, right? Hey, you and your family can escape through a second floor window via those ladders. Getting away versus confronting, the home invader. I would say getting away is best, right? You introduce a lot of variables. You introduce a lot of risk when you're confronting somebody. And this is it's funny because we are a firearms podcast, and we're talking about getting a firearm for home defense. But at the end of the day, if you can get away without firing a single shot, right? I think that's the best case scenario. Or otherwise barricading yourself in, right? Sliding a dresser in front of the door and not standing directly in front of the door. Things can be replaced. People cannot. Especially if you're considering, hey, I am, the head of the household. How would that be if you got injured, or if, heaven forbid, you lose your life in a scenario when you could have avoided that? And so I think, discretion's the better part of valor. And it's not just about our, I guess, a certain sense of machismo or bravado. It's not about that. It's about making practical decisions that result in the best possible outcome for yourself and for your family.
Yeah, and kind of going along with the escaping and evading, there's always, you might have a safe room or safe rooms, one or two, throughout your home, one on the second floor, one on the first floor, and it might depend on what the situation is, where, you might have to go to one versus the other. So say you're able to escape and your entire family is able to get out. Okay, well, where's the rally point? Like, where do you go to as the outside point where you all meet? Is it, is it a half a block down the road? Is it a neighbor's house? And that brings into a piece of something to consider. How well do you know your neighbors? Do you feel like you can trust your neighbors? Can you work with your neighbor to say, hey, just so you know, we've known each other for 3-4 years, 5 years, whatever. I'd like to, develop a plan if something were to happen. And if my 3-year-old is able to get away and rings your doorbell at 3:00 in the morning, then please let him or her in, right? So it's if you feel like you have that ability to trust your neighbor, where you can trust them with your life, your spouse's life, your child's life, it might be like a bit of a reciprocating, like, hey, I'll watch your property and family if you watch my property and family. So it of course, there's always a considerations that need to be made. Can I truly trust this person in the worst case scenario? And that's a question that you yourself will have to answer. Neither of us are going to say yes or no. That is for you and your personal decision to have that conversation with your neighbor if you feel inclined to do so. But if you are, again, able to escape and evade, that worst case scenario situation, great. What do you do then? And those are some options to consider.
That brings up a good point in that community is really one of the best deterrents for property crime. Having neighbors that know you and you know them, and they know when something is off, right? A light is on when there isn't a light supposed to be on, or a door is open when there isn't a door that's supposed to be open, or they know you well enough that they know what your family members look like. If you have somebody come over often, have a brother-in-law or sister-in-law or aunt or an uncle who's usually at your house, and they see somebody that they don't recognize, and having the the relationship with you to be able to question somebody who they don't know. I've been in that situation before myself, where I've had a neighbor text me, hey, there's a strange man in your driveway, and in that instance, it was somebody who was performing a service on the home, but I was very grateful that my neighbor was aware, and she's like, hey, you normally don't have people over at your house at that time. And so I looked like a suspicious guy, unmarked vehicle. And so I figured I'd give you a call. And so I think those are the types of things that people aren't considering, especially in today's culture and society, where we're a bit more arm's length with our neighbors. We connect with people over social media a little bit easier than it is to connect with people in real life. I've been in situations where I've known my neighbors very, very well, where they watch my animals and they have a spare key. I've also been in situations where I have no idea who my neighbors are. Right? I've spoken to them maybe once or twice and said hi. I much, much prefer those situations where I know my neighbors really well and they know me really well, and I can trust them to watch my property, and they can trust me to watch theirs. I think, again, it's the best prevention is a tight-knit community. Some other considerations, in regard to escape and evasion, or whatever the case might be, it would be medical. Critical medications that you might need to have on hand. How long can you or your families go without that medication? Do you have sick or already injured family members? Has somebody got the flu, or somebody got a broken leg, or whatever the case is? And, making sure that's taken into consideration, and that's something that you're planning for when going through that type of drill or that kind of planning. And then, sometimes people take care of family members that have medical conditions that are permanent, right? Bedridden, attached to, ventilator, or, some sort of machine, medical equipment at your house. So, how are you considering those things? Again, it's something that everybody needs to consider, and we don't know what everybody's personal situation might be. I certainly am not in any of those three scenarios, but I think those are certainly things that everybody who might have a family member who has a medical condition should consider when we're talking about planning and rally points, and what to do if something happens.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, we won't be able to cover every single possible option, and our intention is not to think of every single possible option. We're trying to give that insight to help you think at that outside the box level, where this is a perfect example of what Marvin just mentioned, is having a family member, or maybe you yourself having, maybe you got a broken leg or broken arm or something like that. It's like, okay, well, does my plan need to change? But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, if I have a broken leg, am I on a rancher? Do I live in a rancher? Do I live in an apartment complex? Do I live in a townhouse? It's like, there's so many different things that you can consider. So we just encourage you in your personal situation to kind of feel things out and think, okay, what makes sense for me? So yeah, great point, Marvin. Now, one thing that I wanted to touch on here, and you may be wondering if we were going to talk about this, kind of fun, animals and pets. So I want you to think of how many people or maybe you yourself, have dogs, cats, any kind of, pet in their home. So we did a little bit of research, and this was as of 2021. So this is, a few years old at this point. me personally, I know a lot of people with pets, so it doesn't surprise me at all. So almost 50% of U.S. households own at least one pet. And you got 49 million households with dogs, 28 million households with cats, and that's a lot. That's a lot of animals. So something to consider is that not every dog breed or cat breed is going to be doing some alerting. If you have a little poodle or something that is very non-aggressive or non-alerting, but at the same time you don't need a Rottweiler or a German Shepherd or anything like that. If you have a dog that's a lab or a golden retriever or something larger, that might be a little bit more intimidating for a burglar to encounter. So it's like if you have a lab or a golden retriever, they might want to play with the intruder, like, oh, there's somebody new, let's go play. But the intruder is not going to be wanting to play with the dog if they're trying to break into your house. So but all I'm trying to get at is, pets are a really good deterrent, and it's something that may not be initially considered, but that's for those pet owners out there, you're already a step ahead in that you might be able to do a little bit of training with your pet, just to see what can happen in that situation.
I will say that I've had a couple of poodles with my wife, and they can be aggressive. And
poodles, really?
Even
No kidding.
Even if they're not necessarily attacking the home invader, they're going to be very vocal about it. They're going to be pretty pissed off. So I'm definitely going to say, even with little dogs, especially little dogs, they get intimidated. They have a lot of fear, and so anything that's out of the norm, they're going to be very vocal about it. They're not going to rip the guy's face off, but they're going to let you know that something isn't right, and that their instinct is you need to fix this issue. But even with little dogs.
Well, especially
the other
well, hold on, especially Chihuahuas. Yeah. They're tiny, but man, they're feisty. Oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever met a Chihuahua that likes me. And loud. Oh man.
And annoying. So that's what you need, right? You need the dog to be annoying and wake you up, and
right. A lot of barking.
The other thing is we're seeing more people with chickens and goats and horses. I'm seeing more and more of that these days. And so again, something else that can help is got somebody sneaking around the backyard where your chicken coop is, right? Your chickens are gonna let you know that something's happening. And so any kind of animal really. Like Jim said, 50% of households own at least one pet. And, if that's a sign that you need to take to go ahead and get that dog or cat that you've been wanting, or, build that chicken coop, take that as your sign, right? So I think we've pretty well covered the non-firearms portion of home defense. So let's get to what everybody's tuning in to listen, to learn about and listen to, is home defense with a firearm. So I guess the first piece of it, and we'd covered a little bit about it, a little bit of this earlier, was that the firearm is the last resort. But what is, aside from that, we have to be a responsible gun owner. We want to make sure that everybody understands that firearms are a last resort. But I guess, Jim, what else would you say should be covered under the topic of a responsible gun owner and firearms being a last resort?
Yeah, so I think it's important to realize that you're going to see a lot of funny stuff on the internet, and it's going to be fun to watch. Don't get me wrong. I have seen so many channels that will make fun of that bump in the night home defense kind of scenario, and they just have a kind of a tactical kind of scenario. They're putting on body armor, a night vision helmet, and just a full kit, and then they got their rifle set up and all this and that, and they're super excited for the situation. That is not real life. In real life, you are going to be scared. You're fearing for your life. You're fearing for your family's life, and it's just a big distinction that you should make, is that you're watching somebody who put a meme together, put a video together to garner views and to make light of a situation, which, let's be real. It's 2024. We all make light of tough situations. It is what it is. But if you're trying to prepare for this, very difficult situation, just realize that real life is not a meme. So I think that's extremely important to realize.
Yeah. And it's the practical implications of it, right? We talked a little bit about this before, evasion versus confrontation, and having a firearm really does up that risk, both from a physical standpoint, but also ups it in a legal standpoint. Use of deadly force is something that a lot of people get hung up on, and so if you can get away or attempt to avoid the confrontation by barricading yourself, or, hey, letting the person know, I've got a firearm, I've called the police, do not come in here, please leave my home. Being able to communicate that is the way to go, versus the, hey, I'm going to, lock and load, and I'm going to go look for the bad guy in my house.
Yeah. Like you're not, you're not SEAL Team 6 conducting a raid in your own house trying to find the bad guy. Like, let's be real. You're trying to protect your life and your family's life. If you have a family, you are going to make sure that you're in a safe spot in your house and make sure that you are doing the things that you need to do to get out safe.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you want to run over the 4 safety rules again for the listeners out there, Jim, as a quick refresher?
Yeah, just a quick refresher. So I think it was episode 1. We did go over this at a higher level, and just want to reiterate, because it is always important to get that refresher. Every single class I've had, we always will go over the 4 safety rules before we do anything. So real quick, just rule number 1. Treat all guns as if they were loaded. Number 2, never let the muzzle cover anything that you're not willing to destroy. Rule number 3, keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on target. And rule number 4, identify your target and what is behind it, which I will expand into know what's in front of your target, to the side of your target, and behind it. So just kind of knowing all of your surroundings.
Awesome. Thank you for that. In everything that we're talking about right now is really to help, minimize yourself as a victim, both for the home invasion, but also, afterwards of putting yourself in a legal risk, or, or something with law enforcement, and also minimizing your family's risk, so that they're not victimized. So, one of the other things that I like to really emphasize for new or prospective gun owners is this gray man concept. So gray man is somebody who blends into the environment, somebody who is gray, right? Nobody pays attention to it. You don't stick out. And one of the things that a lot of people do when they first buy a firearm is, you realize that you get a bunch of stickers in that box with your gun when you buy it, whether it's a Glock sticker, a SIG sticker, a Smith & Wesson, a Second Amendment sticker, right? And I think there is an appeal to kind of sticking that sticker on things, right? Put it on your windshield, or not windshield, but the bumper of your car, or the rear window of your car, or whatever the case is. And my advice is always, don't do that, right? It's kind of, hey, I've got a gun sign. Come get it, right? I might have left it in my car, or, I'm on vacation and I've left it at my house. I really don't like that, or any of those quippy stickers like this house, protected by Smith and Wesson, or don't tread on me because I have guns, or whatever the case is.
It's just trying to make sure you're not advertising what your situation is with firearms. It's like, I mean, I'll be honest, I love stickers and patches. There's always, something that comes with the shirt, or, some accessory that you buy, a mag holster, something like that. There's always going to be something that you get, and it's fun to add to the collection. But yeah, you are absolutely right. It does nothing, positive for you when you're in, maybe you just moved to an area and you're trying to, learn the lay of the land. What worse way to, kind of introduce yourself to the area than make yourself known as somebody who has a lot of guns, and you may not know that maybe you're in a high crime area and you have no idea of that because you haven't been there long enough to know that. So just a lot of things to consider there.
Not even a lot of guns, right? It could have one gun,
but they might not know that on your stuff. Right? So like you might just have one, but if you have a lot of stickers on your back window, it's like, oh, well, this person, I want to go raid their house. I want to follow them home because they might have a lot, and then maybe you only have one, but then they'll start raiding, your 3 bedrooms, your basement, whatever, because they're looking for your secret stash of stuff, right?
Yeah, especially if they're like, hey, this guy's on vacation. He's been posting on social media about his
exactly.
his
just like we were talking about earlier
in Europe or something.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that I really encourage is for people not to know. So not going around and saying, hey, I've got a gun. I like to go shooting. What do you think? Or inserting it into conversation. I think for me, most of the people who eventually do find out that I am a firearms owner, I think that the thing that is most gratifying to me is they say, well, I didn't know that you were a gun owner. I didn't know that you liked shooting, that and I think that's the thing about it is I think normalizing normal people owning guns is an important thing, and it should be something that that people don't necessarily need to talk about, but it should be something that what people would consider a normal everyday Joe or Josephine would have, and it shouldn't be something that's odd or out of place.
What's funny is, as you were saying that, I thought, well, that's an interesting contradiction. And I don't mean that you were contradicting yourself. I'm thinking back to our first episode in that we were talking about being at the range or being at a competition match or something like that, and asking other people to, oh, can I shoot that? Or can I see what that, or what gun is that? So, you're actively striking up a conversation with somebody at the range. Whereas what you're saying here is, you don't want people to really know that you have guns. Well, I just want to, in case people were thinking, well, they're contradicting themselves. Well, no, we're saying that once you're at the range, I mean, you can have these conversations with people, of course, because you're going to find something that's going to be interesting to you. You're going to want to, strike up conversations with people that are like-minded. I think, the danger of this, and I don't mean danger in like a bad way, but the questions could come up of, is it going to be okay to talk about this with this person because they don't know that I enjoy going to the range, or they don't enjoy that, or they don't know that I enjoy this activity. So whether it's a workplace, whether it's a friend of a friend of a friend, it's like, oh, well, what are they going to think? So it's just being smart about who you're engaging in conversation and using some discernment as to what the how deep into a conversation can you get with people, and again, it's not about hiding anything intentionally to because you're doing anything wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. You're exercising your right. You're exercising your right as a citizen here in the United States. So you're not doing anything wrong. It's just, there can be stigmas and such like that. And it's just, we're trying to protect you, and we want you to have an enjoyable time, and an enjoyable experience.
And it's about protecting yourself from people who might let it slip, right? Your coworker might not want to steal your guns, but if your coworker knows where you live and they've got a sketchy buddy or a sketchy relative or a sketchy neighbor, and they start talking about it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I know, Jim over there. He loves guns. He goes to the range all the time. He talks about his collection." And they tell the wrong person, right? And they're like, "Oh yeah, well, what neighborhood do they hang out in? Where do they go to the range?"
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are the types of things where we're really trying to protect people from is getting any of that information out, especially in today's day and age. Guns are expensive. We were talking about it in the last couple of episodes. Is guns are not cheap, and so even if it isn't something that was inherently dangerous and can be used to commit crimes, it's something it's like having a $600 bill or $600 in $100 bills hanging out somewhere, right? What if you were a bad guy? Why wouldn't you want to go take that if you knew that was available? So with that, I think we can start talking about some situations, Jim. During the day or bump of the night. So during the day, what are some of the situations that you can think of that our listeners should be considering, and what are some of the things that they can do to preempt any kind of issue or becoming a victim of crime?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways we can break this up. So I'll do it into like a day and night kind of thing. So like during the day, if you're just around your house, what does storage look like? So you have several options that we kind of addressed in the previous episode. Our buddy Dave was on, from the local gun shop talking about storage. But just keep that in mind, because there's 250,000 guns that are stolen per year. That's a statistic that we got from some research at the ATF. And then 54% of guns that are used in crime are traced back to legally purchased guns. So that just says right there that people aren't storing their firearms properly. And again, there's different levels of storage, and then there's a whole lot of different, you can go from, call it $20-$25 worth or of, how much it costs to get a little lockbox kind of thing, all the way up to, 5 figures, 10, 12, 15, $20,000, gun safes. So obviously everything in between. So just figuring out what works for you in your situation, in your price range, and for the amount of firearms that you have or intend to own. So that's number one. When you're in your home, what does gun storage look like? And especially, as we were discussing earlier, if you are away on vacation or you're going out, what does gun storage look like when you're not at your home? Kind of one thing, also reiterating the gray man tactics from above. I'm not going to rehash them or anything, but just, kind of, if you wanted to rewind and kind of hear what that looks like, just encourage you to re-listen to that and kind of refresh, what does that gray man kind of look like?
Yeah, and I think that's the one piece of it is safe versus storage, right? Storage is something that keeps it out of toddlers' hands or kids' hands or people who shouldn't have access, versus a safe, which is something to keep people from taking it, right? You put jewelry, you put valuables in a safe, and people can't get into it easily. There are a lot of options out there. You don't have to have a $20,000 safe to keep your firearms safe from people who are trying to get in there. When you combine, say, a $200 safe that you can get off of Amazon that bolts to the underside of your bed or bolts to the floorboard, screws into floorboard. Combine that with your alarm system, or combine that with, some of the techniques that we were talking about in terms of avoiding home invasion. That becomes pretty powerful in keeping your firearms out of the wrong hands and out of criminals' hands who would be using that. Where Jim was talking about 54% of guns that are used in crimes are traced back to legally purchased guns. You don't have to leave it in your car in order for them to steal it, right? I've known a couple of people who've had gun collections stolen while they were on vacation, and they had gun safes, and they were gone long enough that, the criminals had plenty of time to break into those safes. No safe is going to be 100% bulletproof and keep a bad guy out of it forever. Safes are going to delay them and make it hard enough that, ideally the police get there, somebody calls the police, authorities are there, or they get scared off by some other means, an alarm or whatever the case is. So I think that's an important distinction, like Jim was saying, is storage versus a safe or secure, or a way of securing it from people who are trying to take it, versus keeping it from people who are just curious or might hurt themselves with that firearm. So
and then
with
going
that, let's talk. Yeah, go ahead. Bump in the night, right?
Yep.
Bump in the night. What's a bump in the night look like, Jim?
So then we have bump in the night. So first we had during the day when people are awake. Now we got bump in the night. So extremely important to know like where your family is. And I know, Marvin, you touched on this. If the kids are asleep and you're wanting to watch a TV show. Okay, well, the kids are upstairs. Wife and I, we're downstairs. We're watching a TV show, or maybe one of us is downstairs, one of us is putting the kids to bed upstairs. So they're, kind of knowing like what's the situation of where people are located. Then you have the gun storage versus gun staging. And that is also an important distinction that we want to make. Is first we talked about storage versus safes. Now we have storage versus staging. So what does that mean? So we have gun storage is kind of like what we were just discussing. You have your lock boxes. You have, as we talked about in the last episode with Dave, you have cabinets, you have safes, right? So then with staging, so that's how you kind of feed into that home defense mindset. So you have several options here, and we will list off a couple companies of things that you can look into. So there's one company, I think we mentioned it the last episode, it's called Stopbox. There's one called Vaultek, and then there's one called Vara, Vara. I would say, Marvin, I know that you have a little bit more experience with the differences between those. So if you want to go into, some of the different options that they have, I've seen, some models of the varied, of those three companies. But it's interesting because I know that I just saw something. I think it was one of the Vaulteks. I didn't know that they released a new model of it. So I know that you're a little bit more up to speed on those kind of things. So yeah, take it away if you want to go a little bit more in depth there.
Yeah. So I have a toddler, and so keeping firearms out of her grubby little hands is job number one for me. And
well, that's just to keep the firearms, but rid of peanut butter and jelly, right? Like that's the first thing.
That's and spit and goldfish dust and everything else. I just don't want them sticky all the time.
Exactly.
But I looked into a lot of these different options that you just talked about, Jim. Stopbox being primarily for handguns. It's a very cost efficient option for a lot of people. I think right now they're running they're like $50 or $60, and it's buy one get one or something like that. Ridiculous. It's a patented feature, and I think when it comes out to it, there's like 81 different combinations of how to open it. The big thing about Stopbox is that it's pretty quick to open. You use your fingers, and there's like 3 different depths for your pointer, middle, and ring finger, and different depths, how you push them in, and then you have to push down on the stop box and use your thumb to depress the thumb button before you can open it. I think it's a fantastic option for people who have kids who are not teenagers. I think even if they are teenagers, I think it's pretty difficult for those kids to get into that. Also comes with a cable, so you can attach a cable to it, and then you can wrap it around, say, a part of your bed or part of a desk or something like that, and so they can just walk off with it. The other brand that you had talked about, Jim, was Vara, and I'd looked into Vara. Vara is they have a couple of different options, a little bit pricier, somewhere between, I think they're like $275 to $400.
Yeah, that looked about right.
We'll put some links to each one of the websites in the description, just so that people have the access and you can take a look for yourself. So Vara has a couple of options. One is a handgun holster that basically is a locking holster and has a biometric mechanism to it that allows you to basically draw the gun with your thumbprint. So as it's the biometric sensor is in a very natural place. So as you're in a draw stroke motion, you just put your thumb right next to the rear of the handgun on the left side. If you're a righty, I think they also have a left-handed configuration, and you just, as you're drawing, you put your thumb there. It reads your thumbprint. It releases, and now you've got the firearm. You mount that to the side of your bed. You mount it to, a desk. You mount it to something that is heavy and stationary. And I think the downside to that is your firearm is in plain sight. So it is a holstered firearm in plain sight where everybody knows that you have a gun. They can't get it out of the holster, but it's there. They've also got a system called Racked, and this is not for handguns. This is for long guns. They've got a rifle. They've got a version for rifle. They've got a version for rifle, traditional rifle and shotgun, and they've got a version for AR-15. And what that is it's basically a biometric wall rack. So it's got a locking mechanism. It covers the trigger group, as well as I think it also covers the charging handle. And so you can't actually operate that firearm while the locking mechanism is in place. You use your biometric thumbprint to release the locking mechanism, and then you can withdraw the firearm from that system. So you just mount that above your bed, next to your bed, in a closet, wherever you want to mount it. And it's kind of out there in the open. Anybody can see that you have a firearm, but they just can't get to it. The last one that Jim, you talked about is Vault-Tec. I have a number of Vault-Tec products myself. They do everything from big standing safes that hold a bunch of long guns and some pistols to little smaller bedside safes. They've got a bunch of different options in terms of how you open them, so that you can open them with a keypad, you can open them with biometrics, you can use an actual physical key. Some of their options even allow you to open it with their app. And they also have some like emergency buttons that are Bluetooth connected to the safes. And so if it's in the middle of the night and you're woozy and you can't get your thumb or you're afraid that you can't get your thumb on the reader, you can't punch in the code quickly enough, or you can't get it right, then you can just hit this Bluetooth button. Comes in two different flavors, one with a fingerprint reader, another one that is just standard, no safety. So a little bit dicey there because it just pops the safe open. So Vaultec has a lot of those options. So again, anywhere from $50 for the stop box. I think for Vaultec they run all the way up to somewhere mid 2000s, close to $3,000 for their pricier options. But it's what are you going to have on your bedstand, right? Obviously, you don't want to just have a handgun sitting on top of your alarm clock or in a drawer, especially if you've got little kids running around. So what is the best option for you? I think you got to kind of take stock of your current situation and which one of these options fits your lifestyle, fits your budget, fits your desired level of preparedness the most.
Great. Thanks, Marvin. So yeah, then we have going from staging and storage and all that. So if that situation were to arise where you need to open that lockbox, I'll just call it in a general term. Then you have to execute that plan that we were talking about earlier with your family, or if you're by yourself. Then you're trying to wait it out, barricade yourself in. We want to just make sure that as somebody who may not have had any training, we're trying to just encourage you to execute a plan that keeps you safe and puts you at as little risk as possible. So now, assuming you're in that safe room that we were talking about earlier, you have your family there, everybody's safe and accounted for. So now you're calling 911. You're preparing for the entry of police, so that they can help you get through that situation that you're going through. So now comes a little bit more into some specifics, because we've kind of hinted at there being a few different types of domiciles, right? You have apartments, you have townhouses, you have duplexes, you have single family homes, you have rural, suburban, city life. There's a lot to consider. So now it's trying to get to, okay, so now what do you do if you live in an apartment? So Marvin, what are things that you want to kind of point out from apartment living?
Just to touch back on what you were talking about, safe rooms. Obviously, not everybody can make a safe room, even if it's not what we were talking about, one that has a heavy steel door or whatever the case is. But getting your family behind you, getting your family in a location that isn't in the line of fire, and then for my family, it's my wife having a long gun and kind of propping herself on the bed. So she's supporting herself on the bed so she doesn't have to stand there. And she can have that firearm pointed at the entryway to our bedroom, and knowing that she's going to be able to hit whatever she's going to be shooting at. And so even if it's not a safe room, right, having that consideration of how are you going to position yourself and that firearm in a defensive posture, to make sure that whoever is trying to make their way into your home, that you can engage them. If that, again, last resort, you don't have any other option. And for my wife, she wouldn't have any other option. It's hard to get from the second floor to the first floor on a ladder with a toddler. So from there, we're talking about an approach for an apartment. I think one of the most important things, consideration-wise for apartment, is what are the walls made out of? Most apartments, if you can hear your neighbors screaming and yelling, or partying, or you can hear their TV, your walls are probably made out of drywall, probably not very thick at that. And so one of the considerations for an apartment would be what's the penetration look like through those walls, making sure that even if you follow the four safety rules and you do know your target and what lies beyond, you can't 100% guarantee that you won't miss, that the bad guy isn't running, that the bad guy doesn't trip and fall and you pull the trigger, whatever the case is. And so knowing what those walls are made out of and then choosing the appropriate platform is important. And I think this is part of the conversation, Jim, is if you are considering the firearm as a do-it-all, am I going to use it for carry? Am I going to use it for carry and home defense? Probably a pistol at that point, right? And what kind of pistol? Different caliber pistols have different levels of penetration. Are they going to tumble once they hit drywall? Once they hit a stud? Or you might be lucky. My wife at one point in her life lived in an apartment where the walls are made out of concrete. And so she didn't have to worry about that. She could have a 308 and she wouldn't have to worry about her neighbors getting hit by anything. So I think those are the considerations. If you're not looking at carrying outside of your home, I would probably say a shotgun, right? You can aside from some pretty spicy buckshot, right? You probably be fairly safe from, especially once you start moving away from buck or you start going to some of the low recoil buck where it's, really the velocity drops off pretty quickly. You might be in a better position. I'm not talking that we will also have some links to some videos on what penetration looks like from different weapons platforms. But, at the end of the day, a shotgun might be your best bet in that apartment scenario. One of the other types of living, arrangements or buildings that people might encounter a lot would be townhouses. So, I've lived in a townhouse and, knowing a lot of townhouses are 3 stories, right? Another consideration would be, is anybody on the floor where you might be discharging your firearm? Apartments, you're pretty much, most of the time it's just 1 story. So you're guaranteed that on the floor that you're on, there's going to be somebody there. But with a townhouse, that might not be the case. Especially if it's late at night, and all the bedrooms are on the 3rd floor and not on the 2nd floor. My experience with townhouses is that the 2nd floor generally is like living space, kitchen, bathroom, and maybe an office, but nobody's sleeping there all the time. And so, is that something that might happen? Is that somebody is coming into your home, and if you are in a scenario where you're discharging your firearm, might be better to do it on the 2nd floor, or even the 1st floor. What are your thoughts on this, Jim?
So I just want to take a quick step back, and I will disagree on one thing that you were saying, and this is coming from just how I know that newer shooters are.
How dare you?
I know. I know how newer shooters are. They don't really do well with recoil, and I think the part that I'm going to disagree with is I personally don't believe that a shotgun is going to be the best case scenario for somebody who may be getting their first purchase for a home defense weapon. I just don't think that a 12 gauge shotgun is going to be the right thing or the right tool. But this is where we will always emphasize everything is a trade-off, number 1. Number 2, there's so much that comes with personal preference, and again, just everything's a compromise. Like you will find what works for you in your particular best situation in whatever you have to work with. And I'm not saying that a shotgun is a bad platform. I just personally don't think that a brand new firearm owner, brand new shooter is going to do well under stress in that type of scenario. That's all.
Well, I think that's what we've always talked about is going to the range and trying the firearm out right.
Yep.
And so, you know, you and I generally, when we shoot shotguns, right, we're looking at this pretty spicy buckshot, or we're looking at a slug or something like that, right? And so I think, you know, if we're talking about somebody who's just looking for home defense, you don't necessarily need to have the spiciest buckshot, and you certainly don't need to be loading your tube up with slugs, which is, both of those are going to be pretty brutal in terms of recoil. But when we start talking about some of, you know, some of the loads that are, you know, less robust, you know, I'm not talking about birdshot, but, you know, and again, it's up to everybody to kind of decide on what they feel most comfortable with. But, you know, as long as we're not talking somewhere in between, say, you know, birdshot and a slug or spicy buck, I think is potentially pretty good for somebody, especially if they are bracing themselves. They've got their elbows on a bed, right? They've got the shotgun. They're holding it with two hands. It's against their shoulder, right? I think there's a potential there. You know, I think, especially once you start talking about shotguns and you start putting, you know, accessories on it and things like that, I think it's a pretty feasible platform. I think the other piece about it is, you know, you're talking, you know, ideally something like a 6-inch pattern, you know, at, you know, from a distance, within those interior distances. Even a 4-inch pattern, I think, you know, gives somebody a little bit more to work with than trying to use a handgun. Now, the caveat to all of this is, if you have to go and get people and bring them back to a central location, and you have to maneuver, right? So if you are in an apartment, apartments generally have narrow hallways, right? You know, you've got doorways kind of leading into each other. And if you have to go out and get a family member and bring them back, then it might be more difficult with a shotgun, with a long gun, trying to maneuver through a narrow hallway or through a series of, you know, interconnected doorways to get your loved one back. And so, again, this is all situation dependent.
Yes. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so you're gonna have to make the decision. What is the trade-off, right? Am I gonna be able to put in enough time at the range with a handgun to be confident? And if I'm, you know, encountering somebody as I'm going to go get my loved ones and bring them back to a central location, am I confident that I can actually engage that person, that home invader, you know, effectively without missing? Especially, like we said, in an apartment complex, thin walls, you know, penetration is going to be a concern. So, you know, that's again, it's all situation. You got to figure out what works best for you and what kind of training and, you know, what you're capable of investing in order to make this something that is both feasible and viable for you. Did you have anything else to add for the townhouse thing, though?
Yeah. So yes, for both the townhouse and the apartment. You know, just touching on there's so many differences, but then so many similarities, right? So the one thing that I just want to say is that, you know, they're in the same price range as you would get for a good, decent handgun. You will find that there's also in the same price range, you'll have an option for a decent shotgun, and the same thing for an entry level rifle. So I just want to emphasize that you're not locked into one platform at a certain price point. And for example, I'll use $600. There are options out there in each platform that you can go home after a purchase and feel confident that what you have purchased was a good first firearm purchase. So I don't, like I said, I'm not discounting any of them. Especially shotgun, when I, kind of was disagreeing there. But when we're saying everything's a compromise, personal preference, all of that, Marvin said, it's a great idea to go out, try it, rent it, see how it works for you at the range before you make that purchase. So I think that, just wanted to emphasize again, there are options for you in the same price range as you'd be looking for in other platforms.
And just for everybody's information, I don't recommend rifle for apartment or townhouse.
Right. Yeah,
Personally.
I'm just saying, like in each of those, in each of those platforms. Yeah, I definitely would not recommend rifle in townhouse or apartment.
Yeah. And again, that's a penetration issue, because you got a lot faster projectile coming out of a rifle. That's not going to want to slow down. And drywall might as well not be there for that. But we've got some videos, like I said, we've got some videos for that. Go ahead and check those out and see for yourself. They're setting up real walls and, what look to be real size rooms, and how many layers of drywall and studs and things like that each platform will penetrate.
Yeah.
So then let's talk about a single family home. So Jim, what are your thoughts on a platform for a single family home?
Well, so you kind of open things up to any, really. Like, again, I would lean towards more of a pistol or rifle in the terms of single family home. I think that when you have a spouse and family, I think that it's an easier method of moving around when you have a pistol. You can follow those 4 safety guidelines or 4 safety rules a little bit easier when you have, like a 3 to 5 inch barrel than if you had a 16-inch barrel. I mean, that's just easy distinguishable, kind of thing to think of there. When it comes to, space, you have traditionally, you would think that a single family home would have more space and more ease of movement. So maybe it's not as constrained. So you might be able to have a rifle setup that would make it a little more comfortable for you. And what I mean is, you have those slightly longer distances that you might need to engage, from one side of the house to another. Or like you said, Marvin, you have your wife that's, kind of proned on the bed, braced, kind of aiming at the entrance, the doorway entrance of that room, of your safe room. But I think a very important piece is what we'll get into a little bit when it comes to accessories. So before we do that, I want to, make sure that you kind of give your opinion and, about your approach there.
I think it depends. I've lived in single family homes in very sparsely populated, where I've got a couple of acres, and we've got trees, and we've got quite a distance between me and my neighbor, to living in a single family home where it's much more densely populated, and my neighbors are literally there's 5 feet between my house and my neighbor's house. And so I think for me, it kind of depends on the area that you're living in. And if you're living in a suburban area that is more densely populated and the houses are a lot closer together, I would still not want to go with the rifle. I think if I lived in a suburban area that gave me a lot more space in terms of distance between me and my neighbor, we've got more trees surrounding the property that might act as a backstop for a round. I would probably opt for a rifle. it kind of depends. I think it also depends on who's operating the weapon. For me, like I said, I think it's a lot less. It's a lot less aiming for my wife. I think the other thing is sound. So discharging a rifle inside, especially an AR platform rifle indoors, is pretty jarring for most people. My experience as a Marine infantryman, I've done a lot of shoot houses, and even with hearing protection, and again, depending on the type of home, if your walls are made out of concrete versus walls made out of sheetrock, how high your ceilings are, I mean, it can still be pretty jarring for somebody to discharge a rifle inside of a house. And so for me, if I'm not there and my wife needs to be able to hear my daughter or be able to hear what else is going on, shooting an AR-15 inside, you're going to go deaf for a while. And so that is another consideration. Obviously, you can mitigate that with something like a suppressor, as we talk about accessories later. But for me, the report of a shotgun is a little bit more manageable, especially when we're talking about indoors. Report of a handgun is also a little bit more manageable. But again, these are all things dependent on how fast that rifle is or how fast that round is going. We're talking about rounds that aren't necessarily breaking the sound barrier to rounds that are absolutely breaking the sound barrier. And so for me, that's why I'm saying, if it were for my wife, I would go with it. I would still go with the shotgun. I think even if it were for me, my preference would also be with the shotgun, simply from a sound perspective. I think the other piece of it is, for me personally, if I were operating the weapons platform, right, a shotgun is preferable because I can swap out a round if I need to. So if we're going with something a little less than a buckshot or a low recoil buckshot, something that might not put somebody down, might not stop somebody, then I have the option of swapping in something that has a little bit more pep to it, right? So I can go from a low recoil buckshot to, say, a slug, if I really, really needed to. Whereas you really don't have the opportunity to swap out a round. You just put more rounds into the person or the intruder if they're not stopping with the other platforms. So those are the considerations for me when talking about weapons platforms in single family homes. Anything else to add, Jim?
No, I don't think so. At least specifically on that. I think this is a great opportunity to get into the accessories, though. I'm kind of chomping at the bit because one thing that you brought up was suppressor, and I'm like, oh, I want to talk about suppressors now. So I do want to kind of lead off with that, and everything that you were saying about rifles. I think that's where, I mean, let's be real. You can get a suppressor for a shotgun, rifle, or pistol. So it doesn't matter, which platform. You can get a suppressor for any of them. Now, one thing that I want to make sure that our listeners know is that a suppressor does not make the sound zero. You see this as as something that's in the movies and TV shows, and it's like, oh, the suppressor completely removes any sound that comes out of the gun. No, that is completely wrong. That's false. I want you to know that if you shoot a gun with a suppressor, it is still a loud noise. Now, is it suppressed? Absolutely. That's why it's called a suppressor.
So with that, Jim, real quick, one thing that we didn't touch on. So we're talking about standard shotgun, standard pistol, standard AR style, chambered in 5.56, 223, right? With what you're just saying right there, right? 300 blackout.
I knew you
So
were going
that-
to bring
that
that up.
is-
Yes. So, okay. Yes. The 300, if you get a, yes, if you get a subsonic 300 blackout round with a suppressor, you don't, like, it sounds like a pellet gun. There's no need for, hearing protection. And I use that from experience. I remember I was in an indoor range. I shot a subsonic 300 blackout with a suppressor, and it was without hearing protection, and I was blown away of how little sound it was. It was I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. I was like, how is this possible? So yes, there are definitely things and situations that will apply, as an exception. And I was hesitant to bring it up, but now that you brought it up, yes, that is one example.
But there is
Yes.
there's a cost penalty to that, right? So
Yes.
so
Yep. Go ahead.
it is not cheap. It is not
Yes.
cheap to get a 300 blackout system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once you start talking about getting that, and you're getting it in a shorter barrel, and you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about getting a suppressor, and you start talking about subsonic rounds, right? Like, what was that Dave Chappelle joke about, making bullets like $100 or something like that. You really got to hate that person to shoot them, right? Because it's going to be so
Right.
expensive. But I mean, it's not $100 a round, but I mean, like, it's pretty darn expensive.
Last I
for
remember
subsonic.
looking, it was like $1 a round, or close to $1
Yeah.
a round. Yeah, it's between 80
Yeah.
and 80 cents to $1 a round, something like that. So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it is
so-
not
so,
it's not
like-
cheap, but
So it's $30. It's $30 that you can have hanging out in a magazine there, right?
Right.
So,
yeah,
but I mean, even then, right? We're talking about suppressors, especially 300 blackout suppressors, depending on who you're getting it from, right? We're talking at least $1,000 generally, and then 300 blackout pistol, 300 blackout rifle. We're talking about even more money there, right? We're talking probably at least $1,000. You want to get fancy with it, you're talking $2,000, right? I think
so-
one that people might be familiar with, maybe not. Could be a bit obscure outside of gun folks. Would be Q's Honey Badger, right? Getting a Honey Badger and 300 blackout, right? We're talking quite a bit of money there.
but it's a great gun, right? So it's a
Oh yeah.
it's a phenomenal firearm. So it's a great rifle. I have shot them several times, and it's a nice setup. So yeah, nothing bad to say. It's just you pay it with money, right? So that's all. But no, just real quick back to suppressors in general. I just wanted to emphasize, yes, a suppressor will not completely reduce the sound that comes out of taking shots. So with that though, it may be something that you would want to look at in the future, due to that that fact that it does reduce some of the sound issue that comes with firing indoors. So not saying that it's a requirement, not saying that if it should be even your first or second purchase, but maybe something to consider if you want to save up for that as a future purchase. I strongly would recommend it if you have that as something that you're kind of contemplating, just because in an indoor scenario it is very, very nice to have.
And we'll be covering more on so suppressors and machine guns and grenade launchers and all of those crazy things. They are called NFA items. So they're the National Firearms Act items, and so there's a little bit more to getting those than walking in your average gun store and filling out a 4473, which is your standard background check that is required for all gun purchases conducted through an FFL, and most of the time, even depending on the state and the type of firearm, always for pistols, even if it's a private transaction. So we'll talk more about that in another episode, because there is a lot to go over. So
there.
what other accessories did you want to cover real quick, Jim?
Yeah, so I'd say the thing that jumps out to me is really a flashlight. And I know that both of us really have, probably a couple companies that we would recommend. The first one would be Streamlight. The other one would be Surefire. And, both of those make, very good quality flashlights, both weapon mounted lights and handheld lights. So you don't even need to, have a firearm in order to, carry a flashlight around. But, for something that would mount onto your firearm, I would recommend one of those two companies. If you have a pistol, I would also probably recommend having a handheld, so that you're not using your firearm for like a search. You don't want to, especially as a novice. If you're in a home defense scenario, you really wouldn't want to be pointing your firearm at something that you don't know. If your house is dark, if your power's out, somebody possibly broke in, and you don't want to be, going around, pointing your gun at something that you don't know is or isn't there, especially if you don't know exactly where your family members are, and then, you have a bad situation. So yeah, that's what I got. What do you think?
Yeah, I think one of the big things for light usage, I think you hit it right on the head, is not using your gun as a search tool, because you're basically pointing your gun at whatever your light's pointed at, and you don't point your gun at anything you don't intend to shoot. And so I think that's a great it's a great reason why to have an offhand light instead of having it on your gun. I think there are ways to mitigate pointing your gun at things you don't necessarily intend to shoot. Most lights out there today are really high output 1,000 lumen lights, or at the very least 500 lumen lights, and which is an incredibly bright light. And so one method that someone can use to avoid flagging something that they don't intend to flag with the muzzle of their gun is to have your gun in a high ready position, right? So you're pointing your gun upwards toward the ceiling with the light on, and that light will reflect off of the ceiling and give you enough light to see what else is in the room.
So yes, I don't disagree with that. The only consideration that you should make is if you are on the ground floor and say your family's on the second floor, that's the only consideration I would make, because that would then possibly and potentially violate one of the safety rules. So again, this is where there's a lot of situational things that you need to be concerned with and just be mindful of. But yeah, it's
all
a
trade-offs.
So I just wanted to throw that out there as something else that our listeners might want to consider. So
yep. Well, and having both hands on, right? Having both hands on your gun versus having to shoot one-handed, versus potentially flagging somebody upstairs, or being aware of where that pistol is pointed, right? In what's above you. It's all trade-offs, and I think that's the piece of where we should reiterate, right? Training is paramount. If you're going out and training and shooting one-handed, an offhand light probably works really well for you, right? Get that accuracy down with your dominant hand.
Yep. And then continuing on, we have, I'm going to reiterate actually what Dave said last, or what we worked with Dave last time, is the difference between an optic and a laser. So, we talked about last episode how there's people who think that an optic and a laser are the same thing, and I'm not laughing, at those people, because you might just not know. I'm just laughing at, there is. There is a distinction that needs to be made so that you are able to intelligently talk about, what you're looking for. So, an optic is where that red dot is showing in the window, and it's an aiming device that can be put on to make aiming a little bit easier. And then the laser is actually where think of it like where your flashlight is mounted. For example, I'm picturing a pistol. So on that rail that goes under the barrel. So you would have the laser pointed, or the laser mounted there, and then it's pointing, down with your barrel, going down. When I say downrange, I mean, it's pointing away from you at whatever possible target there is. And it is a visible laser. So it's something that, people can see if you're looking throughout your house or throughout the floor of your house, your first floor, second floor, whatever, you will see that laser. And that means that somebody else could see the laser too. So it's not just like an optic where you're looking through that windowed device and you see that red dot or that green dot. You are the only one that's seeing that red dot or green dot in the optic. Whereas, like I said, the laser that is pointed, that is a laser device.
I generally tell people to steer clear of lasers.
I do too. I just wanted to make sure that people knew the distinction that optic versus laser. That's all. I don't.
Yeah, don't get a laser.
Yeah,
don't get a laser. They're terrible.
I don't like lasers.
They're terrible. They're difficult to zero if you can zero them at all, and it's just they're not fantastic. You put your hand in the wrong place and you're blocking it. Get some schmutz on the outside of it, and all of a sudden it's obscured. It's just a terrible option.
Well, the only difference is night vision laser. That's a different story, though.
Yeah, that's a whole
different rabbit hole.
And you can zero those things pretty easily.
Yeah.
And,
but we're specifically speaking of a laser that is mounted where you can see with the naked eye and all that.
Yep.
So
yep. Get an optic. I'm going to say get an optic, right? It makes it so much easier.
Optic and a flashlight. If you're looking for pistol, and then actually this is the last piece that I wanted to touch on is a sling. So whether it be a rifle or a shotgun, definitely recommend a sling. Just makes it a whole lot easier when you're trying to maneuver and help. If you're in the room with your family and trying to just kind of get people situated and safe and kind of huddled together. If that's part of your plan, you can sling your shotgun or your rifle, and it's just a little bit more out of the way. You can maneuver with your hands and such like that. So Marvin, what do you think?
I think for me it's more about retention, right? So if you're somebody who's new to firearms and you get nervous, right, it could be pretty easy for you to get nervous, drop that thing, and the last thing you want is to drop it and scramble to bring it back into position. So if your heart is racing, your hands are a little sweaty, right, and the weapon slips out of your hands, or you drop it or whatever the case is, it's attached to you, and so you can just pick it up real quickly. It's in the right position, as opposed to if you didn't have a sling, you drop that thing, it rolls under the bed, right? It's pointed in the wrong direction, and all of a sudden you have to kind of pick it up and get back. I mean, it's makes life a little bit easier. It's a reason why in the military you say that you dummy cord the weapon to yourself so that you don't lose it. So especially for guys that are new in the military, you really want to make sure that those weapons are dummy corded to them, because again, they're going to get nervous. They're going to get into a situation where they might drop that weapon, and you don't want to be lost, or for them to you want them to get that gun back up as quickly as possible in the in the direction that you need it to be pointed. So that would be my reason for a sling is, and then obviously if the police do get there, just make sure you unsling it. Do not meet the police with a weapon slung on you. That's a really easy way to get shot. So if you are using a sling and the police do show up and they are responding and they're there to help you, normally you see the lights. You see the red and blue flashing lights. Once you see those red and blue flashing lights and they're outside, unsling that weapon and, put that weapon down and, let the police know where you are, what your disposition is. Hey, I am, I'm in here. I had a weapon. It's on the ground. We have our hands up, whatever the case is. But that would be the big con to a sling is, it's attached to you when law enforcement sees you. All right. So the last thing that we wanted to chat about would be ammo. Right, Jim?
Yeah, and there's a lot to consider when it comes to ammo. And one thing that I will say is we have several links that kind of talk about different ballistics and different ammo types, and like Marvin said, how do these people test through different types of material, different wall thicknesses, all sorts of stuff like that. So we definitely want to just emphasize that we have links in our episode that you can click on, that you can view if you're interested. But we just want to give a very kind of high level overview of different types of ammo that you will either see in the store or encounter, or if you're shopping or hearing people at the range talking about here's some things that you might hear.
And as you're going to go buy ammo with your firearm, I think that's something that you're going to want to have a conversation with everything that we talked about, right? What kind of building do you live in? What are the walls made out of? What are some of the considerations that you have for your particular situation? Have that conversation with your local gun store employee rep, and see what their recommendation is. Different brands have different levels of performance. Different brands have different features, things like that. So I think there's a lot to kind of discuss, but definitely want to make sure that it is a point of discussion when you're making that purchase.
Yeah, so just going into like Marvin was saying, having the discussion with the local gun shop people, just words that you'll hear. So you'll hear about hollow point, you'll hear about frangible, you'll hear about full metal jacket, you'll hear about steel core penetrator, lead core. So I know that we touched on these a little bit. A couple of them, we touched on them in the last couple episodes. So, but just so that those are the words, the phrases that you'll hear in terms of ammo.
Just one last thing, a nice book to pick up if you're ever in a situation where you need to defend yourself. The Law of Self-Defense: The Indispensable Guide to the Armed Citizen by Andrew F. Branca.
Yeah, and it's a really good book, and also the foreword is actually done by Massad Ayoob. And if you have done any research, or if you plan on doing any research, both of these gentlemen very, very, very knowledgeable. Andrew Branca is a lawyer, and he is also an expert in the field of like self-defense type of scenarios. So same thing with Massad Ayoob. He's also an expert in the self-defense world as well. Very, very intelligent men, and highly recommend this book for you to read. It's I think it's like about 300 pages, so it's definitely a good, thorough read for this type of this topic. So I again just highly recommend it.
Yeah, and I don't think that there could be a worse situation than if you had to defend your life because you were in fear of your life from a home invasion, and just to find yourself in a scenario where you could be put into prison for defending yourself.
Yeah.
Again, that would be depriving your family of your presence, of your earning power, whatever the case is, and it is definitely something that it's a big consideration, and there are certainly things that you can look at to help yourself in that situation. if you follow any of the gun tubers, you've heard of things like USCCA, you've heard of things like Law Shield. We can't recommend one over the other. I think, that is a decision that everybody needs to make, whether or not you would like to have some sort of legal insurance in that potential scenario. So, but again, there are options out there like USCCA carry insurance as well as Law Shield. Costs will vary, but I think a good place to start would be The Law of Self-Defense by Andrew F. Branca, and you can dive into what makes the most sense for you from there.
I know that we said that we had one last topic, a couple times now, but I do have one final topic that I want to bring up, and we've talked about it a couple times in our previous episodes, but just want to keep stressing it, and that is that training is your friend. What's the point in having a tool if you don't know how to use it, especially in this kind of scenario where, your life or your family's life could be on the line. So it's extremely important, and we want to just continue to emphasize, and we will continue to emphasize how much training is a huge part of this. We believe strongly in it. We will, continue to provide the, links, resources, anything like that. So I'm going to bring up again, shootingclasses.com. provides a great opportunity for you to search and seek out instructors in your area, or if you want to take a trip and go specifically train with a particular instructor, you can find where that training is. You can find who those trainers are. So just extremely important. We'll be continuously emphasizing training. We'll be continuously emphasizing safety. So
get out there and shoot and have some fun while you're at it.
If there's anything that you'd like to respond with in terms of feedback, feel free to email us at buildingthebasicspodcast@gmail.com, or feel free to reach out to us on Instagram, and our handle is @buildingthebasicspodcast. Thank you all for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode.